I should have never written that scene. The one where the Mafia boss slammed his assistant against the desk, whispered threats like promises, and kissed him until his knees gave out, because that was the exact line, the exact cursed line, that got me caught. At first I thought it was a prank, just another comment from a reader who liked pretending to be the characters. My fanfic, Chains of Love, the Mafia boss and his assistant, had blown up more than I ever expected. I was just Peachy Kiss, anonymous, harmless, spinning ridiculous tropes and feeding my Delulu brain. I never thought anyone in the actual Mafia would ever touch AO3. But then, I saw the private message, a message that turned my blood to ice. Rewrite this. You got me wrong. I laughed nervously, staring at the screen. Rewrite what, my tags? The over-the-top dialogue? The boss's cold glares that I made sound like smoldering longing? Whoever this was, they were committed to the bit. I typed back, hands shaking with a weird mix of fear and amusement. LOL. Sure. Boss. Tell me how you want your gay awakening written. I shouldn't have sent that. Because 2 days later, when I walked out of my lecture hall clutching my laptop bag, a black car pulled up in front of me. The windows were tinted, the door opened, and he stepped out. Adrian Moretti, sharp black suit, sleeves rolled up just enough to reveal veins that could kill me faster than any gun. His eyes were like daggers dipped in midnight. His presence was suffocating. My heart thudded against my ribs so violently I thought it would crack, and in that moment, with my knees wobbling and my soul leaving my body, I realized something horrifying. He looked exactly like the boss I'd described in my fic. I froze, gripping my bag like a shield. He didn't say a word at first, just studied me with those merciless eyes. Then, in a voice that carried more weight than thunder, he asked, "Peachy Kiss." My jaw dropped. My soul left my body. My entire existence was suddenly nothing but regret and fear. How, who, what? I stammered like an idiot. His lips twitched, but not into a smile. Into something worse. Amusement. You wrote about me. I wanted to deny it, to run, to fling myself into oncoming traffic. But my body betrayed me, trembling too obviously. And before I could squeak out a defense, someone else stepped out of the car. Felix. His assistant. The hot assistant. Blonde, sharp jawline, grin wide enough to split the sky. He looked even more like my fic version than Adrian did. The irony nearly knocked me out. Felix leaned against the car door, raising his brows at me. "So you're the one making me cry in chapters 12 through 15. What?" I yelped so loud students turned their heads. "Get in the car," Adrian ordered, ignoring my meltdown completely. "No, absolutely not. I don't even..." Felix snorted. "You're lucky, sweetheart. Usually people who write fan fiction about the boss don't get invitations. They get bullets." My legs wobbled. This was it. I was going to die because I couldn't resist writing Mafia smut at 3 a.m. But instead of a bullet, Adrian's hand shot out, gripping my wrist with terrifying precision. He didn't drag. He guided me into the car like I was already his. I should have screamed. I should have fought. Instead, I sat there in stunned silence as the door slammed shut. The car pulled away, city lights blurring into streaks of neon. My heart was pounding so hard it hurt. Adrian finally turned to me, leaning close enough that I could smell expensive cologne laced with danger. "You will rewrite it," he said, each word slow, deliberate, like a sentence of execution. My mouth went dry. "Rewrite what?" "Everything," he hissed. "You turned me into some lovesick, soft-hearted idiot. Do I look like a man who spends nights staring at his assistant's lips?" I blinked at him, then at Felix. Felix was covering his mouth, shoulders shaking with laughter. "Oh my God," I whispered, horrified realization sinking in. "You actually read it, not just me." Felix gave me a wink. "Half the crew's been following your updates. Fridays used to be boring until Peachy Kiss dropped another spicy cliffhanger." "What?" Adrian slammed his hand against the seat beside me, making me jump. "You will fix it. If I must suffer reading this drivel, at least portray me correctly, as if there was a manual for how to write Mafia bosses. I'm not, this is insane." My voice cracked, but the words tumbled out anyway. "You can't just kidnap me because you don't like your fanfiction version." His eyes narrowed. "Watch me," my breath hitched. My brain screamed at me to panic, to cry, to plot my escape. But underneath all that, another horrifying thought slipped in. If he wanted me to rewrite the fic, that meant he was going to act it out. The car swerved as Felix burst out laughing, wiping tears from his eyes. "Boss, you realize you're demanding fanfic accuracy, right? This is unhinged, even for you." "Shut up," Adrian growled, but his glare flicked back to me. "Peachy Kiss, you're going to start rewriting tonight." I swallowed, heart hammering so violently it hurt. Somewhere in the mess of my fear, a new thought bloomed, dangerous, unthinkable. If I rewrote it, what kind of chaos could I put him through? I should have jumped out of the car, or screamed, or at least tried to act like a normal kidnapped person. But no, my brain short-circuited and instead started replaying every single spicy trope I had ever written. The boss dragging his assistant into a corner, the assistant's lips trembling, the moment where the boss leaned close and whispered, "You're mine." My stomach twisted. Oh no. Oh no, the car ride ended far too soon. Adrian's mansion, no, palace, towered before me, all glass and steel and looming terror. Armed guards watched us, their expressions neutral, but I could swear a few of them recognized me. My paranoia screamed. They're readers, too. Felix leaned toward me as we stepped inside, his grin far too playful for someone working in the Mafia. Relax, Peachy. Nobody's gonna shoot you. You're basically our entertainment channel now. I'm not Netflix. I hissed. Better. You're interactive. Before I could punch him, Adrian's voice cut like a blade. Study, I froze. What? He didn't look back, just walked with purpose down a hallway. My study, where you wrote that ridiculous scene. Oh no. Oh God. He led me into a massive office straight out of a Mafia cliché. Dark wood shelves, expensive liquor, a desk big enough to hide bodies under. My stomach dropped. This was the desk, the exact one I had described in my fic. He turned, leaning against it with arms crossed. Show me, I blinked. Show you what? That scene. His voice was calm, but the threat under it was obvious. The one you butchered. Felix practically collapsed onto the couch, gleefully watching. Oh, this is going to be good. Panic. Pure, unfiltered panic surged through me. You can't be serious. That was fiction. Words on a screen. Not rewrite it. Adrian's eyes pinned me in place. And this time get it right. I stammered uselessly. I can't just, do it on command. Then I'll help you remember, he said, pushing off the desk. My heart stopped as he walked toward me, every step deliberate. He towered over me, his shadow swallowing me whole. My breath caught, and suddenly, all those ridiculous fanfic lines I'd written felt far too real. He placed his hand on the desk behind me, trapping me there. The smell of his cologne, the heat of his presence. It was overwhelming. You wrote that I whispered in his ear. His voice dropped, low and dangerous. He leaned close enough that his breath brushed my skin. Do you think I whisper, Peachy Kiss? My knees nearly gave out. I couldn't move, couldn't think, couldn't breathe. Felix cackled from the couch. Oh, she's gonna faint. $10 says she faints. Shut up! Adrian snapped, eyes never leaving me. I swallowed hard, my brain spinning. I should have protested, pushed him away, screamed. But instead, words tumbled out, shaky and pathetic. You wouldn't whisper. You'd order. For a flicker of a second, something like satisfaction crossed his face. Better, he murmured, and then, like a psychopath method actor, he grabbed my chin, tilting my face up. In your story, I kissed him. Sloppy. Desperate. His eyes narrowed. Do I look like a man who kisses sloppy? My entire soul combusted. What? No! You're controlled. Calculated. Exactly. Before I could process, his lips brushed mine. Not sloppy. Not desperate. Controlled. Precise. A warning wrapped in silk. I squeaked, freezing like a malfunctioning robot. Felix clapped once, dramatically. And scene. Honestly, Peachy, that was way better than the chapter. I shoved Adrian back, face burning. Are you insane? You can't just, yes, I can. His voice was terrifyingly calm. And you will keep rewriting until you get it right. I'm not your fanfic puppet, I snapped. But my trembling voice betrayed me. You are until I say otherwise. His words slammed into me like a bullet. Then he straightened, adjusting his cuffs like nothing happened. Now sit. Right. My brain screamed at me to resist, to stand tall, to reclaim some dignity. Instead, I collapsed into his absurdly expensive leather chair, pulling out my laptop with shaky hands. Felix leaned over my shoulder, peering at the screen. Don't forget the tags. Readers live for those. I hate you, I muttered. You love me? He sang back. Adrian circled the desk like a predator, watching me type. Every keystroke felt like a death sentence. I typed nonsense at first, my hands trembling too hard to focus. But then, something shifted. I remembered the look on his face when I'd corrected him, the flicker of pride in his eyes when I'd said he wasn't sloppy. A dangerous thought crept in. What if I made him suffer through the most ridiculous tropes imaginable? Slowly, carefully, I began to type. Felix read over my shoulder, grinning wider with each sentence. Oh no, this is genius. What? Adrian snapped. Felix smirked. She's rewriting you in a maid costume. Adrian froze. His glare shot to me. What? I smiled sweetly, heart racing with reckless adrenaline. If I have to rewrite, I'm doing it my way. For the first time, Adrian's composure cracked. His jaw tightened. His eyes burned. Felix howled with laughter. Boss, you're doomed. And that was the moment I realized maybe this rewrite thing could actually be fun. I had expected him to explode, to order my immediate execution, to drag me into some dungeon and make me regret every keystroke of my stupid fanfic career. But instead, Adrian just stared at me, silent, jaw tense, eyes dark enough to swallow me whole. Rewrite, not reinvent, he finally growled. I tilted my head, pretending to look innocent. You said rewrite. You didn't say how. Felix clutched his stomach, laughing so hard he nearly fell off the couch. Oh, this is priceless. Boss, you've officially been peachy-fied. Adrian shot him a death glare so sharp I thought Felix would combust. But the assistant just leaned back, smirking like a cat with cream. I, meanwhile, felt something dangerous bubbling in my chest. Recklessness. Maybe it was adrenaline. Maybe it was the fact that my body still tingled from that kiss I refused to acknowledge. Or maybe I just wanted to watch him squirm the way I'd squirmed since he first showed up. Fine, Adrian said at last, voice like ice cracking. If you insist on this. Nonsense. His gaze burned into me. Then I'll play along, my jaw dropped. Wait, what? You wrote it. You direct it. But I'll prove you wrong with every word you type. Felix clapped his hands together. Oh my God, this is better than cable. And that's how I found myself, 20 minutes later, in Adrian Moretti's luxurious living room, watching a Mafia boss hold up a frilly white maid apron with murder in his eyes. This, he said flatly, is an insult. This, I corrected, fighting back hysterical laughter, is character development, character assassination, potato. Felix was recording on his phone, gleefully narrating like it was a nature documentary. Observe, the mighty predator forced into domestic humiliation. Will he adapt or will he perish? Adrian looked like he wanted to strangle both of us. But then he actually put it on. The apron strings strained across his broad chest, the frills absurd against his sharp suit. He looked less like a maid and more like a demon cosplaying housekeeping. I slapped both hands over my mouth to keep from screaming with laughter. Oh my God. You actually? Right, Adrian snapped. Now so I did. My fingers flew across the keyboard, narrating every humiliating detail with gleeful abandon. The Mafia boss, once feared across the city, now stood defeated by a pastel apron, his pride crumbling faster than a poorly baked souffle. Felix leaned over, wheezing. Don't forget to add the part where he says, Master, may I dust your shelves? I typed it. Adrian read over my shoulder, his face unreadable. Then, slowly, deliberately, he said the line out loud. Master, may I dust your shelves? My soul left my body. It wasn't even sarcastic. He said it with the same commanding tone he'd use in a boardroom or a back alley execution. The words hung in the air, dripping with menace, somehow both terrifying and absurdly. And I slammed the laptop shut. Nope. Done. Goodbye. This is illegal. Felix collapsed onto the carpet, crying with laughter. I think I just descended. Adrian tugged off the apron, tossing it onto the couch. His glare landed on me like a guillotine. Satisfied? Not even close. But I nodded quickly. Yes. Very. Totally. That was enough. His eyes narrowed, as if he could see right through me. Then to my horror, his lips curved. Just slightly. Not a smile, never a smile. But something close. You enjoyed that, he said. I did not. You did. Shut up. Felix, still sprawled on the floor, chimed in between wheezes. Boss, she's blushing so hard I'm afraid she'll combust. I'm not. My face was on fire. Adrian didn't press, but the knowing look in his eyes was worse than any words. He adjusted his cuffs like nothing happened, returning to his usual deadly composure. Enough games. Rewrite the next scene. The next scene? My stomach dropped. You mean yes. His voice left no room for argument. The office kiss. Properly, as if my soul hadn't already fled my body the first time he acted it out. Felix sat up, grinning like the devil. Oh, this is going to be fun. Don't screw it up this time, Peachy. Adrian stepped closer again, that same suffocating presence wrapping around me. My knees wobbled. My pulse pounded in my ears. You wrote me desperate, he said, voice low, dangerous, pathetic. I am not desperate. I take what I want. I swallowed hard. You can't just, I can. And I will. And before I could protest, he grabbed my wrist, pulling me flush against the desk. His body towered over mine, heat radiating off him like fire. This is how it should have been written. His lips brushed my ear, sending shivers down my spine. Not weak, not sloppy, controlled, ruthless. My brain short-circuited. Words failed. Logic evaporated. All I could think was, oh my God, he's actually acting out my fanfic. Felix, of course, ruined the moment. Boss, don't forget the dramatic lighting. Should I grab a spotlight? Adrian turned his head slowly, glaring at him with enough malice to silence a continent. Felix just grinned. I, meanwhile, was 1 second away from either fainting or spontaneously combusting. Because if this was just the beginning of my rewrite punishment, I wasn't sure my sanity, or my heart, would survive. His grip on my wrist wasn't painful, but it was firm enough that I couldn't escape. My back pressed against the desk, cold wood biting through my clothes, while Adrian's presence swallowed every inch of air around me. This, he murmured, voice like silk dipped in knives. His control. My brain screamed, this is insane. This is insane, but my body refused to move. My pulse hammered so violently it felt like it would bruise my ribs. You wrote me weak, he continued, eyes locking with mine. Begging. Hopeless. Do I look like a man who begs? No, I whispered before I could stop myself. Exactly. Then he kissed me again. It wasn't sloppy. It wasn't desperate. It was precise. Devastatingly so. Like he'd mapped out exactly how to ruin me in 3 seconds flat. My knees buckled, and I had to grab the edge of the desk just to stay upright. Felix, the eternal menace, whistled. Damn, that's a rewrite upgrade if I've ever seen one. I shoved at Adrian's chest, gasping, my face hotter than lava. You can't just... Yes, I can, he said calmly, as if he hadn't just set me on fire. My mouth opened, but no words came out. My entire vocabulary had fled my skull. "Write it," Adrian ordered. "What?" "Write it down. Now." Exactly as it happened. Felix bounced on the couch, practically vibrating with glee. "Oh, this is gold. Readers are gonna eat this up. I'm not posting this," I shouted. "Then it stays between us," Adrian said, his voice soft, but laced with iron. "But you will rewrite." My laptop was already back in my lap before I realized I'd obeyed. My fingers hovered over the keys, trembling, mind still fogged with the taste of him. Against my better judgment, I typed. Every detail, every terrifying, thrilling second. Felix leaned over, reading aloud in dramatic tones. His kiss was calculated destruction, his control absolute, his lips. "Oh, Peachy, you're doomed." I slammed the screen shut. "Stop narrating my trauma." Adrian leaned back against the desk, watching me with that same unnerving calm. "Better," he said. "You're learning." "Learning? This isn't a workshop, this is a kidnapping." "Semantics," Felix muttered, smirking. Before I could combust, the door burst open. "Boss!" 3 Mafia men stormed in, guns drawn, panic on their faces. Then they froze, stared, because what they saw was their terrifying, merciless leader standing in front of me with his shirt collar slightly askew. My face red enough to power a city, and a laptop suspiciously snapped shut. One of them squinted. "Is this the fanfic rewrite thing?" I wanted the earth to swallow me whole. Adrian's glare could have ended bloodlines. "Out, but boss, out!" They scrambled away like terrified cockroaches, slamming the door behind them. Felix was howling with laughter now, clutching his stomach. "They know. They all know!" I buried my face in my hands. This is the worst day of my life. Adrian ignored the chaos, straightening his cuffs like nothing happened. "We continue tomorrow." "Tomorrow?" "Yes. You clearly need practice. I'm not auditioning for a Mafia porno." "You're rewriting," he said simply, and that was the end of the discussion. Felix grinned wickedly. "Peachy, you might as well give in. This is your life now." Mafia 50 Shades of Fanfic. I groaned into my hands, my entire soul crumbling. But somewhere, deep, buried under my horror and humiliation, a tiny spark flickered. Because if Adrian insisted on acting out everything I wrote, I had the power to make him do anything, and that was dangerous. Very, very dangerous. I didn't expect to wake up to the sound of muffled yelling, gunfire, and was that karaoke? When I stumbled out of the ridiculously oversized guest bedroom, still wearing the silk pajamas that screamed, "Hostage chic," I found half the Mafia clan in the living room arguing about who should have died in Chapter 12 of my fic. One guy slammed his fist on the table. Boss's assistant would never betray him. He's a golden retriever in human form, damn it. Another guy shouted back, "Read the subtext. Read between the lines." He's secretly plotting revenge. Meanwhile, Adrian was sprawled on the leather couch, sipping whiskey at 9 in the morning like the world's most terrifying lounge singer. His shirt was unbuttoned halfway down his chest, because of course it was, and his expression was equal parts annoyance and smugness, and then his eyes met mine. "Finally awake," he drawled, standing up as if the floor was his personal runway. "We're going on a little field trip." My heart plummeted. "Field trip?" he smirked. "You're going to see how inaccurate your writing really is." Before I could even argue, he snapped his fingers, and the assistant, Felix, still chewing on a piece of toast, appeared like some sarcastic butler summoned from hell. "Field trip, huh?" Felix said with his mouth full. "Let me guess. Drive-bys, threats, maybe a flaming car or two? Should I bring my camera for her? You know, for research?" I wanted to strangle them both, but I didn't get the chance, because 30 minutes later I was shoved into the back seat of a sleek black car, sandwiched between Felix and an overly enthusiastic Mafia goon who kept asking me, "So, who's your favorite? Boss or assistant?" "Be honest." "Neither," I hissed. "I'm writing a formal complaint against fate for even introducing me to you people." Felix snorted. "Sweetheart, you're too deep in now. Might as well enjoy the ride." And then the car doors locked automatically. When we finally stopped, I realized we weren't at some shady warehouse or smoky underground casino. No, we were at a bakery. A pink, floral-decorated bakery. I blinked at Adrian as he strode inside like he owned the place. This is your big Mafia operation?" The baker gasped when she saw him. "Oh, Mr. Blackthorne. The usual? Or do you want extra strawberry cream today?" I swear on my laptop, the man, this terrifying Mafia boss who had threatened to kill me over fanfic, actually nodded and said, "Extra strawberry cream." I choked on my own disbelief. Felix leaned over and whispered, "You know, if you put this in your fic, nobody would believe it. And here's the kicker." Adrian turned to me, licked frosting off his thumb, and murmured in that low, dangerous voice, "Rewrite me as someone who eats cake like a god, not a villain. A king." My brain short-circuited. But the day wasn't over. Oh no. Because just as we were leaving the bakery with 3 boxes of pastries, the rival gang showed up. Leather jackets, tattoo sleeves, sunglasses even though it was cloudy. They blocked the door dramatically like some knockoff K-pop group. One of them pointed at Adrian. "This is our turf. And you brought your little fangirl?" "Fangirl?" Before I could retort, Adrian pulled me against his side, all hard muscle and expensive cologne, and smirked like he was about to perform in the world's hottest perfume commercial. "She's not a fangirl. he said smoothly. She's my co-writer. The bakery went silent. Even Felix stopped chewing his croissant. And then Adrian leaned down to whisper in my ear, his breath warm against my skin. Prove it. Show them what you've written. My hand shook as all eyes fell on me. Rival gang, Mafia clan, bakery staff. Everyone was waiting. So what did I do? I quoted from my own fic, loudly, dramatically. The scene where the Mafia boss confessed his forbidden love to his loyal assistant. And the assistant, Felix, almost spat his coffee everywhere. The rival gang leader actually blinked. Damn, that's kinda hot. Adrian's smirk widened. Rewrite it. With more detail. Oh no. Oh yes. The bakery air thickened like tension before a storm. Powdered sugar floated in the sunlight, but the silence was suffocating. Everyone was staring at me like I was about to drop the hottest fanfic update of the century. And then Adrian smirked. The kind of smirk that made my stomach flip and my brain scream at me to run. But my legs didn't move. Let's give them a performance, he murmured. Before I could ask what kind of performance, he grabbed Felix by the tie. Yes, his assistant's tie. And in one smooth motion, Adrian yanked him close, chest to chest, the tension crackling like a match about to ignite gasoline. My jaw dropped. Wait, what? The bakery collectively gasped. Someone in the back muttered, "Oh my God, it's happening." Felix, bless his sarcastic soul, looked way too calm for someone being dragged into live fanfiction theater. Boss, he deadpanned. Is this really necessary? You know I'm not unionized for this level of unpaid acting. Adrian ignored him. His voice dropped to a dangerous growl, every syllable dripping with authority. Loyalty, devotion, that's what you wrote, isn't it? He turned his head toward me, his eyes glinting like a predator who'd just cornered his prey. That the assistant would give his everything for the boss. My lungs forgot how to breathe. I didn't mean... But Adrian didn't wait. He shoved Felix against the bakery wall, between a display of cupcakes and a rack of croissants, and pinned him there with one arm. The rival gang leader actually pulled out his phone. Yo, someone record this. This is better than Netflix. My face flamed red as Adrian leaned in, whispering right at Felix's ear. The tension was thick enough to chew. Felix tilted his head, rolling his eyes like this was just another Tuesday. I see you're enjoying yourself, Felix muttered dryly. Play along, Adrian hissed. Or I'll make it real, that line. That exact line, I had written it. In chapter 7. My words. My cursed, sleep-deprived, hormone-fueled words. And now my Mafia boss kidnapper was quoting it. Out loud, in public. My body wanted to crawl into a hole and never come out. But my brain whispered something far more dangerous. This is kinda hot. The bakery erupted when Adrian finally pulled back. Not with violence, not with threats, with applause. Full-blown enthusiastic clapping. Even the rival gang joined in. One guy actually whistled. Damn, the tension. I ship it. I nearly fainted. But Adrian wasn't done. Oh no. The sadistic man looked right at me, pointed a finger, and said, Rewrite it. My throat dried. Here? Now? Yes, make it steamier. Steamier. My soul left my body. The rival gang leader grinned like the devil's cousin. Do it, sweetheart. Give us some spice. The entire bakery was waiting for me to narrate smut like it was Sunday story time. My hands trembled. My voice shook, but somehow, I did it. I started reading out loud from chapter 9, the scene. The one where the boss cornered the assistant in his office, trapping him between the desk and his body. My cheeks burned so hot I could have baked bread on them. Every sentence I read made the crowd lean closer, wide-eyed, whispering things like, "Oh, that's good," and "Man, I didn't see that twist coming." And then Adrian decided reading wasn't enough, because he reenacted it, in front of everyone. He pushed Felix against the counter, caging him in with his arms. He lowered his head until their noses almost touched. His voice a husky echo of the lines I'd written. You belong to me. Every thought, every breath, every heartbeat. I squeaked so loud I'm surprised glass didn't shatter. Felix gave me the most done expression in history. Remind me to sue you for copyright infringement. Emotional damages. Something. The rival gang leader shouted. Kiss already! The Mafia goons cheered. Someone threw confetti. The heck, where did they get confetti? I couldn't take it anymore. My hands slapped over my face, muffling my scream. And then Adrian stepped back, smirked like a demon, and said, That's the new draft. Effective immediately. The bakery exploded with applause again. Meanwhile, I was on the verge of cardiac arrest. As we left, still holding boxes of pastries like this was the most normal outing ever, Felix sighed. You realize, boss, you've just given them fuel for 10 new fanfics. Adrian didn't even blink. Good, let them write. She'll make mine better. And then his gaze slid to me, sharp and predatory. Tomorrow, he said, voice low and final, we rewrite the bedroom scenes. My knees gave out. Felix had to catch me before I collapsed on the sidewalk. I didn't sleep that night. How could I? Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Adrian's smirk, heard his voice. Tomorrow we rewrite the bedroom scenes. Those words haunted me like a death sentence. Or worse, like a promise. By morning, I was pacing the guest room like a caged hamster. My laptop sat on the desk, the blinking cursor on a blank document mocking me. How do you even prepare to rewrite smut when the Mafia boss who kidnapped you plans to physically fact-check it? A knock interrupted my meltdown. Breakfast, Felix's voice called lazily. Also, boss says wear something you can faint in. What the hell does that even mean? I shouted back. He didn't answer. 10 minutes later, I shuffled downstairs in an oversized hoodie and sweatpants, the least faintable outfit in existence. Felix was sipping coffee, looking far too entertained by my impending doom. Nice armor, he quipped. I glared. Where is he? Felix smirked. Upstairs. Preparing. The word alone gave me heart palpitations. When I finally crept to Adrian's room, I paused at the door. My hand hovered over the knob. My stomach flipped like a washing machine. And then the door swung open. Adrian leaned casually against the frame, shirt undone just enough to show sculpted muscle, like some smug Calvin Klein ad that had come to life solely to torment me. You're late, he said, voice low. I'm not. I checked my phone. Okay, I'm late. But that's because I was panicking, which you caused, so technically it's your fault. He ignored my rambling and gestured me inside. The room was dimly lit, curtains drawn, the massive bed dominating the space like the centerpiece of a stage. My stomach dropped. This was it, the scene of my public execution by embarrassment. Sit, he ordered. I sat, on the very edge of the bed, stiff as a board. Adrian prowled closer, every step deliberate, like a predator circling prey. My pulse thudded in my ears. Chapter 13, he said. Read it. My mouth went dry. Out loud? His smirk was answer enough. With trembling hands, I opened my laptop and scrolled to the infamous chapter, the one where the boss cornered his assistant in the bedroom. Tension so thick you could drown in it. My voice shook as I began reading. He pushed him back onto the bed, pinning him down with nothing but sheer dominance. Adrian moved. In one fluid motion, he grabbed my wrists and pinned me to the mattress. I shrieked. What are you doing? He lowered his face until our noses nearly touched. Fact-checking. My brain short-circuited. My words. My stupid, horny, sleep-deprived words coming to life. Continue, he commanded. I swallowed hard and forced the words out. The boss leaned closer, his breath ghosting over the assistant's lips, each second stretching into eternity. Adrian's breath was ghosting over me. My heart hammered so violently I was sure he could feel it through my chest. Is that accurate? He whispered. I whimpered. Actual whimpered. Too accurate. He smirked, satisfied, and shifted his grip to one wrist, his other hand brushing against my jaw. His touch was deceptively gentle, sending shivers down my spine. Next line, he ordered. My eyes darted across the screen. The assistant's hands trembled, but he couldn't look away. The boss was overwhelming, unstoppable, consuming. Adrian's thumb traced my lower lip. I nearly combusted. And then, bang, the door slammed open. Felix strolled in, holding a tray of snacks. Do you guys want popcorn or should I just leave it in the hall? I screeched. Adrian growled. Felix blinked. Oh, he said flatly. Bedroom scene, my bad. Carry on. He set the popcorn on the dresser and walked out like this was totally normal. I wanted the ground to swallow me whole. Adrian sighed, clearly annoyed at the interruption, but his eyes didn't leave mine. We'll pick this up later, he murmured, voice thick with promise. My whole body shook as he released me. I scrambled upright, clutching my laptop like it was a shield against his unholy aura. Felix popped his head back in. By the way, rival gang activity on the West Docks. Boss, you coming? Adrian finally tore his gaze away from me. Yes, she's coming too. I sputtered. What? Why am I going to a gang fight? Research, he said smoothly, already buttoning his shirt. Research, of course. So instead of curling up in bed to recover from nearly fainting, I found myself shoved back into the sleek black car, sandwiched between Felix and another Mafia goon who was still obsessively shipping boss assistant. This time, though, my heart wasn't just pounding from fear. It was pounding from the memory of Adrian's touch, his voice, his eyes burning into mine. And that was far scarier than any rival gang. The docks reeked of salt water, gasoline, and bad decisions. Rusted shipping containers loomed like crooked tombstones. Seagulls screamed overhead, and a bunch of scary-looking men in leather jackets stood around posturing like they were in a music video. And me? I was in the middle of it, clutching my laptop like it could ward off bullets. This is insane, I whispered to Felix. Why am I here? I write fanfiction. I don't do whatever this is. Felix casually cracked open a soda like we weren't surrounded by armed criminals. Relax, it's just a standoff. Just a standoff? Before he could reply, Adrian stepped forward. Black coat flaring in the wind, his expression carved from stone, he looked every bit the terrifying Mafia boss he was rumored to be. The rival gang leader, a guy with too many tattoos and a scar conveniently slashing across one eye, grinned at him like a hyena. Blackthorn, Scar sneered. Didn't expect you to bring... His gaze flicked to me. You're fangirl. I bristled. I'm not a fangirl! Half the dock turned to stare. Scar chuckled. Then what is she? Decoration? Adrian's lips curled into a smirk sharp enough to draw blood. He reached back, hooked his arm around my waist and yanked me flush against him. She's my co-writer, he said smoothly. My brain blue-screened. Again. Scar raised an eyebrow. Co-writer? What the hell does that mean? Adrian's smirk deepened. It means she tells my story. And then he looked down at me. Show him. What? I squeaked. Read it, Adrian ordered, low and dangerous. Chapter 15. The blood drained from my face. Chapter 15 was the warehouse scene. The one where the boss asserted dominance by pressing the assistant against a wall in front of rival gang members, claiming him like property. I can't. You will. His eyes burned into mine, daring me to refuse. The rival gang started snickering. What's this? Story time? Felix slurped his soda. Oh, it's better than that, trust me. My hands shook as I opened my laptop. The cursor blinked like it was mocking me again. My voice cracked as I started reading. The boss cornered his prey, the weight of his presence crushing the air. He pinned him against the cold wall, ignoring the eyes on them, and whispered. Before I could continue, Adrian moved. He grabbed my wrist and spun me, slamming my back against a shipping container with a clang that echoed across the dock. I gasped, the laptop nearly slipping from my hands. Adrian! He leaned in close, lips at my ear, his grip firm and unrelenting. Finish the line. My voice trembled. Whispered, You're mine. Let them watch. Scar's smirk faltered. The entire dock went silent. Adrian's breath ghosted hot against my skin as he murmured the line, word for word, straight from my fic. You're mine. Let them watch. I swear my knees nearly gave out. The rival gang erupted. Not in violence, in commentary. Yo, that's cold. One guy shouted. Boss energy. Another yelled. 10 out of 10 delivery. Someone clapped. Scar looked utterly baffled. What the hell is this? Felix grinned, raising his soda. Live-action fanfiction. Scar sputtered, completely thrown off his intimidation game. This is ridiculous. Adrian didn't even blink. No, this is power. He pressed closer, his chest solid against mine, his hand gripping my jaw just enough to tilt my face toward him. My pulse thundered, my breath stuttered, and my entire brain fried. Scar finally snapped. Enough! We came here to settle territory, not watch your weird fanfic kinks. Adrian slowly pulled back, smirk razor sharp. And yet here you are, unsettled, Scar growled. But his men were already distracted, half of them whispering heatedly about whether boss assistant was canon. I wanted to die, or melt, or maybe both. Adrian finally released me, brushing invisible dust from his coat like nothing had happened. Negotiations over. Leave the docks, now. Scar hesitated, clearly off balance from the bizarre turn of events. His men were already restless, distracted by fandom discourse. Finally, with a curse, he stormed off, his crew trailing behind him in confusion. The moment they were gone, Adrian turned back to me. His eyes gleamed with something unreadable, dangerous, possessive. Good work, he murmured. Good work? I exploded. You used my fanfic as a weapon. In a gang fight! Felix slung an arm around my shoulders, grinning. Honestly, 10 out of 10 strategy. I'd subscribe for updates. I shoved him off. This isn't funny. I nearly had a heart attack. Adrian's smirk softened, just slightly, but enough to make my chest tighten against my will. He brushed his fingers against mine, so subtle I almost thought I imagined it. Tomorrow, he said, low and final. We continue the rewrite, privately. My stomach did a triple backflip. Felix groaned. Oh, come on. At least wait until I get more popcorn. Sleep didn't come easy that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw him, Adrian Moretti, that unreadable smirk. Those eyes that could strip me bare without a single word. The way his hand had brushed mine, just barely, but enough to set my nerves on fire. Privately, he'd said. That word echoed in my skull until sunrise. By the time I dragged myself to breakfast, I was a caffeine-deprived ghost. Felix was already at the kitchen table, eating pancakes like he hadn't been part of my emotional collapse 12 hours ago. He looked up, smirking. You look like death. Romantic death, but still death. Thanks, I croaked, pouring coffee with trembling hands. He leaned back, arms crossed. So big day. You and the boss, huh? Alone, rewriting, privately. Don't, I warned. Felix ignored me, the way demons ignore prayer. Should I set up cameras? For continuity? I will choke you with that pancake. He grinned wider. Oh, Peachy. You sound just like Chapter 10. Before I could commit a crime, footsteps echoed down the hall. Heavy, deliberate, commanding. Adrian entered the kitchen like a shadow wearing a tailored suit. He wasn't supposed to look that good in the morning. He shouldn't have been allowed to look that good at all. His sleeves were rolled to the elbows, veins faintly visible against sun-browned skin, and his expression, cold, focused, made my heart skip like it forgot its job. Eat, he said, tone final. You'll need the energy. I blinked. For writing? His lips twitched, just barely. Something like that. Felix muttered around a mouthful of syrup. Translation: emotional trauma with a side of intimidation. Adrian shot him a look that could silence earthquakes. Felix raised his hands in surrender. I shoved down a forkful of pancakes, trying to calm the tremor in my hands. So, what's today's scene? Adrian didn't answer immediately. He sipped his coffee instead, gaze fixed on me over the rim of the mug. It was unnerving, intimate, like he was seeing the version of me I didn't even know existed. Finally, he said, Chapter 17. I froze. That was the chapter, the one I'd never posted. The one I'd written at 3 a.m. in a fit of insomnia and delusion. The one where the boss broke down. Not physically, but emotionally. The one where he admitted he wasn't as cold as everyone thought. How do you even know that chapter exists? I asked, voice small. Adrian set down his mug. You write drafts in Google Docs. My soul left my body. You hacked my account? He raised an eyebrow. You kidnapped yourself by writing about me. Felix snorted so hard coffee sprayed out his nose. I buried my face in my hands. I hate my life. Adrian ignored my suffering and stood. My office. 10 minutes. Then he left. Just like that, leaving behind the scent of his cologne and the wreckage of my sanity. Felix leaned across the table, eyes sparkling. You know, if you two ever get married, your vows are going to be court transcripts. I threw a napkin at him and stormed off. Adrian's office was darker than usual when I entered. Curtains half drawn, the light slicing across the floor in harsh lines. He was already at his desk, reading something on his phone. Probably more of my drafts, because God hates me personally. Sit, he said without looking up. I obeyed. My hands fidgeted in my lap. Chapter 17, he said, finally setting the phone aside. You made me weak. It's called character depth, I argued, instantly regretting it. His eyes snapped to me, sharp as glass. You made me cry. I made you human. Do I look human to you? He stood then, slowly, and crossed the room until he stood right in front of me. My pulse jumped. You wrote that I confessed, he said, voice soft but dangerous, that I admitted. Fear, guilt, regret, his words dripped with venom, but beneath it, something else, something raw. I swallowed. Yeah, because even monsters bleed. For a heartbeat, he didn't move. Then he leaned down, his face inches from mine. Then write it, he whispered. Make me bleed. The words hit me like a thunderclap. What? Write it again. But this time, look at me when you do. My throat tightened. Adrian, I can't. He gripped the edge of the desk, caging me in without touching me. You can. You will. I opened my laptop with shaking fingers. The screen glowed between us like a barrier, fragile and useless. My voice trembled as I began typing. The boss sat in the dark, his empire silent. He had everything, money, power, fear. But none of it filled the hollow in his chest. Adrian didn't speak, but I could feel his gaze burning into me. I typed faster, the words spilling out uncontrollably. He didn't know when the emptiness began. Maybe when he first spilled blood. Maybe when he realized control was just another kind of cage. Stop! His voice snapped through the air. I froze. He stepped closer until the desk pressed into my stomach. His hand came up, slow, deliberate, and tilted my chin upward. Do you think that's what I am? He asked quietly. A man trapped by his own control? My breath hitched. I think you're afraid of losing it. His eyes flickered, just for a second, with something almost vulnerable. Then it vanished. Afraid? He gave a low, dangerous laugh. I don't fear anything. Liar, I whispered. The silence that followed was electric. He stared at me, and for the first time since I'd met him, I didn't see the Mafia boss. I saw a man holding his own edges together with sheer willpower. And maybe, just maybe, he saw me too. Not as Peachy Kiss, the writer who turned his life into a joke, but as the only person who dared to write the parts of him he couldn't face. He released my chin and turned away, his voice low. Continue. My hands trembled as I typed again, heart pounding. The boss wasn't made of steel. He was flesh, bone, blood, and somewhere beneath the smoke and the danger, he remembered how it felt to be touched without fear. When I glanced up, Adrian was staring out the window, but his shoulders had gone rigid. Enough, he said finally, voice tight. I stopped typing. He turned back, eyes darker than ever. Tomorrow, we rewrite again. I nodded weakly. He paused at the door, hand on the frame. You're getting too good at this. Then he was gone. And I was left alone in the dark, with nothing but my racing heart and the terrifying realization that somewhere between all the chaos and the rewrites, I was starting to understand him. Maybe even worse, I was starting to care. I didn't sleep again, not because of nightmares this time, but because every time I closed my eyes, I could still hear his voice. You made me bleed. It replayed like a line from a song I didn't want to love but couldn't stop humming. By sunrise, I'd rewritten that scene at least 5 times in my head. In one version, he kissed me. In another, he shot me. In the worst version, he did both, probably in that order. When I finally dragged myself into the hallway, Felix was leaning against the wall like he'd been waiting for a scandal to happen, which, knowing him, he probably was. He held up a coffee mug that said Naharni One Accomplice. Morning, novelist of doom. Do you ever not make everything sound cursed? Do you ever not make everything sound romantic? Touché. I took the mug he offered, black coffee, mercifully strong, and groaned. He said we'd rewrite again today. Felix's eyebrows shot up. Oh, so round 2 of Mafia book club? It's not a club. Does he know that? Before I could respond, the intercom on the wall buzzed. I jumped. Adrian's voice came through, smooth, low, and annoyingly calm. Peachy. My office. Now. Felix made a mock gun shape with his fingers. You're either about to get promoted or buried. I sighed. Both sound equally likely. Adrian's office looked different this morning. There was a second chair pulled up beside his desk, a legal pad with notes scrawled across it in his sharp handwriting, and, most disturbingly, a steaming cup of tea on the edge of the table. Tea? I asked, suspicious. You didn't eat breakfast, he said without looking up. Caffeine on an empty stomach is bad for you. I stared. Are you being considerate? He glanced at me then, his mouth curving in that ghost of a smirk. Don't get used to it. Right, emotional whiplash. My favorite, I sat. So, what are we rewriting today? Chapter 18? No, he slid the legal pad toward me. Something original. I blinked. Original? You wrote my story, he said, leaning back in his chair. Now I want to hear yours. My mouth went dry. My story? Yes, his tone softened, but his eyes didn't. Who is Peachy Kiss before she starts rewriting other people's lives? I tried to laugh it off. Trust me, it's not that interesting. I'll decide that. I met his gaze, and for a second, I almost told him everything. The loneliness, the fear, the nights I stayed up writing about him. Because it was easier than admitting I didn't know who I was without a keyboard. But I couldn't, not to him. Instead, I deflected. You really want to hear about a girl who eats cereal at 2 a.m. and cries over dog commercials? His lips twitched. I've heard worse origin stories. I sighed and picked up the pen. Fine. But you asked for it. The words came slower this time, not like when I wrote about him, where the story poured out in adrenaline and chaos. This was heavier, rawer. I grew up in a town so small, the gossip ran faster than Wi-Fi, I began. My mom was a nurse, my dad sold used cars, and I was background noise. The quiet kid who read too much and spoke too little. Adrian didn't interrupt. He just listened, head tilted slightly, as if cataloging every syllable. I started writing because it was the only way to make people look at me. I could invent the version of myself I wished existed. Bold, clever, unafraid, like her. He murmured. I blinked. Her? The woman who stood in my office last night and called me a liar. Heat crept up my neck. That wasn't me. That was adrenaline and poor decision-making. He smiled. Small, genuine, almost human. Maybe, but I liked her. My brain short-circuited. You liked what? He stood abruptly, as if realizing he'd said too much. Enough sentimentality. Continue writing, but something had shifted. His tone was still cold, but there was an edge missing, like the knife had dulled ever so slightly. I wrote another line, then another, and somewhere between confession and fiction, I realized he wasn't just reading my story. He was in it now. By noon, the air in the office had changed. Lighter, almost. Adrian paced as I wrote, occasionally stopping to make a note or challenge a sentence. You overuse metaphors, he said at one point. You overuse intimidation, I shot back. He looked over his shoulder, and for the briefest second I saw it. A flicker of amusement. A man who might have once known how to laugh. We kept going until my hand cramped. Then he finally said, enough. I stretched, wincing. You really have a talent for making writing feel like interrogation. He ignored the jab and gathered the pages. This is better. Better than what? Than hiding. My throat tightened. Adrian, he interrupted by placing a folded note on the table. Tomorrow, 8 p.m. Not here. I frowned. Where then? You'll see. And before I could protest, he walked out, again, leaving me with the note and a headache shaped like emotional whiplash. When I unfolded it, 2 words were written in his precise handwriting. Dress nicely. I stared, blinked, then immediately texted Felix. Help, did he finally kill you or propose? Felix said. He said dress nicely, I replied, not knowing what to do. Oh my God, it's a date. It's a Mafia date, Felix replied back. You're being dramatic, I typed in disbelief. Says the girl living inside a Wattpad fever dream. I swear this man. I threw my phone on the couch and groaned. A date. It couldn't be a date, right? Except the way my heart pounded said otherwise. By 8 p.m., I was standing outside an unfamiliar restaurant, hidden behind tinted windows and an unmarked door. Of course he'd picked somewhere that looked like a front for espionage. The host took one look at me and said, Mr. Moretti is waiting. My pulse jumped. He was at a corner table. Black suit, no tie, sleeves rolled just enough to be illegal. The sight hit me like déjà vu. You came, he said simply. You told me to. His mouth curved faintly. You don't always do what you're told. He wasn't wrong. But this time, I wanted to. As I sat, a waiter appeared with a bottle of wine older than my entire writing career. Adrian poured a glass for each of us, his movements deliberate. Controlled. To rewrites, he said, lifting his glass. I hesitated, then clinked mine against his. To bad decisions. He chuckled lowly, an actual laugh, and I forgot how to breathe. The meal blurred in a haze of quiet conversation and stolen glances. He asked about my writing. I asked about his impossible empire. We circled each other like 2 languages trying to translate the same sentence, and when the night ended, he walked me outside. The air was cold, sharp, alive with tension. He stopped by the car, eyes darker than the city lights behind him. You shouldn't look at me like that. I swallowed. Like what? Like you want to write a happy ending. Before I could respond, he opened the door for me, his fingers brushing mine. Barely, but enough to make my heart forget the rhythm again. He leaned close, his breath warm against my ear. Tomorrow, he said softly. The final rewrite. The city night was alive with neon reflections bouncing off wet asphalt. Every honk, every distant siren, made my nerves pulse in sync with my heart. Adrian walked beside me, his presence a constant pressure that kept me aware of every inch of space between us. My fingers itched to reach for my laptop, to create worlds where I could control the chaos. But out here, control was a joke. Where are we going? I finally asked, trying to sound casual, but my voice cracked anyway. You'll see, he said, voice low and deliberate, like a blade sliding just under the skin. I swallowed, following him into an alley I would have never noticed on my own. The faint hum of engines made me jump as a sleek black van pulled up. Adrian opened the sliding door, gesturing for me to get in first. Inside, it smelled faintly of leather and gun oil. Felix was already there, smirking as if he'd won some secret bet. Why am I always between the Mafia and my own death? I muttered, sliding into the seat. Because you make excellent company, Felix replied. I shot him a glare but didn't argue. Adrian's silence at the wheel was enough to keep me tense. His gaze, sharp and predatory even from the driver's seat, never left me once. After a tense 20 minutes of weaving through the city, we stopped. The van door opened to reveal a warehouse, of course. I should have known, because nothing Adrian did was ever straightforward. Inside, the air smelled of oil, rust, and faintly of danger. Lights hung from the ceiling like stars in a man-made galaxy. Shadows moved in the corners, hinting at silent figures watching, listening. My stomach turned. Adrian didn't speak. He simply led me to the center, where a single chair faced a long table. A folder lay there, neatly labeled, Final Rewrite, Peachy Kiss. I froze. You wrote your own doom in a folder? I asked, incredulous. Not doom, he corrected, tilting his head. Resolution. I laughed, though it sounded hollow even to me. Resolution? You kidnapped me, forced me to act out my fanfic, and now call it resolution? You've been avoiding it, he said, stepping closer. The shadows clung to him like obedient wolves. The story. Your story. It ends poorly. For everyone. What do you mean? He placed the folder in front of me. Chapter 21. The warehouse scene. Your final confrontation. I blinked at the neat stack of papers. You typed this out? I curated it, he said, his voice a strange mix of amusement and authority. But you wrote the first draft, and now, you'll write the conclusion. My pulse spiked. This was bigger than fan fiction now. This was real. Dangerous real. You mean, the gang? I whispered, glancing at the shadows shifting around us. You want me to write the ending to an actual Mafia standoff? Yes, Adrian said simply. Or at least, plan it. Think like the storyteller. Decide who moves, who falls, who lives, and then... Watch! I swallowed hard. Watch? He stepped closer, the faint scent of his cologne curling around my senses. Fact-checking. I shivered despite myself. The word fact had never felt so terrifying. Adrian, you can't... My voice broke as my mind spun in a spiral of panic and awe. This is insane. Insane, he repeated, his lips barely brushing my ear, is what you wrote me to be. You're learning. I twisted in his grip, half to escape, half to see him better. The shadows of his sharp jaw, the subtle curve of his lips, the way his eyes didn't blink. They were mine, only mine, in the universe of my own creation, and yet terrifyingly real. Fine, I said finally, with the shaky authority of someone who knew she had no other choice. I'll write it, but you have to listen. You'll dictate, he said, voice low, dangerous, lethal. I opened the folder. The papers were neatly organized, each scene labeled with careful notes I didn't remember making. And then I realized this wasn't just a rewrite. He expected me to direct them, the Mafia, as if they were players in my fanfic world. I took a deep breath. Okay, first scene, warehouse entrance. Felix, you're my assistant for this. React exactly like the draft says. Everyone else, stay in character. Felix groaned dramatically. You mean I'm still your puppet? Yes, I shot back. But also, crucial to the plot. Adrian stepped beside me, leaning close, his body a dangerous shadow against mine. You dictate. I enforce. I tried not to notice the way his proximity made my knees ache, how the heat of him seemed to seep into the floorboards. I started speaking, narrating each move. The rival gang enters from the left. The boss, Adrian, moves toward the center, calculating, commanding. His eyes lock on Felix, his trust absolute, but my voice faltered. He knows danger lurks behind every corner. Adrian's breath tickled my ear. Continue, he murmured. I gulped, heart hammering. He steps forward, deliberately slow, showing power without threat. Every movement counts. His gaze cuts the room in half, freezing everyone who dares oppose him. I glanced up. The men in the shadows were alert but respectful, and then I realized they were listening. My words weren't just fanfic anymore. They were strategy, a blueprint for control. Adrian's hand brushed mine as he guided me to the center of the room. "Narrate me," he said softly. "Not how you want me, Peachy Kiss. How I am." I trembled, trying to separate fantasy from reality. "You are precise, controlled, ruthless, but not cruel, calculated. Every move is intentional, like chess pieces that can't escape their fates." He chuckled low, dangerously. "You almost understand." Then, he allowed me to place Felix in position, moving him like a marionette under my pen, my voice, my direction. And for the first time I realized this was my story. My words were the power, and he, terrifying and perfect, was letting me wield it. The rival gang entered. Scar at the front sneered, trying to intimidate. I narrated each step. Scar takes the bait. He thinks he controls the scene. But the boss anticipates, moves, counters. The assistant stays close, loyal, indispensable. Adrian murmured beside me, voice velvet and ice. "Keep going." I swallowed hard. The standoff escalates. But the boss, calm, collected, dominates without bloodshed. He asserts control with presence alone. The rival gang falters. Confused, intimidated. Not a shot fired yet, but victory is his. Adrian's fingers brushed mine again. "And you? Do you survive the narrative, Peachy?" I met his gaze, heat prickling my skin. I narrate myself carefully. "I'm loyal, observant, but still terrified," he smirked. "Good. Fear is necessary." For the next hour, we choreographed every line, every move, every pause. The warehouse became a stage. Shadows became characters. My words became law. And Adrian, my terrifying, impossible, predatory Adrian, became my co-star, my instrument, my reality-bending muse. When the final scene ended, the rival gang neutralized without bloodshed. I sank into a chair, exhausted, trembling, alive. Adrian stood beside me, silent, scanning the aftermath of our live rewrite. "You did well," he said finally. I blinked. "Well?" "We just staged a Mafia standoff as fanfic." He smiled faintly. "You directed it. You controlled it." "That's well." My chest swelled with something I hadn't expected. Pride, relief, and something else. Something dangerous, desire, respect, fear, all tangled together. He leaned closer, voice low, teasing, predatory. "Tomorrow." The bedroom scenes, and my knees, already tired from adrenaline and fear and longing, nearly betrayed me, because somehow I knew the final rewrite would not just be about words anymore. It would be about us. The night was heavy, the kind that presses against your chest and makes every breath feel borrowed. Adrian's mansion was quiet, eerily quiet, but that only made the anticipation pulse stronger in my veins. My laptop felt like a weight in my hands, heavy with dread and something else I didn't want to name. Felix had been sent off with some excuse about security updates and research notes, leaving me alone with Adrian. The air seemed to thicken as soon as the door clicked shut behind the last guard. The only sound was the faint hum of the city below, and the soft tap of my own heartbeat in my ears. "Sit," Adrian commanded, voice low and smooth, like velvet sliding over steel. I obeyed immediately, sinking onto the edge of the massive bed like a puppet on strings. My hands gripped the laptop as if sheer force could keep my world from unraveling. Adrian leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed, eyes sharp enough to cut glass. "Chapter 13, he said. "Bedroom scene. Read it." My stomach dropped like a stone into acid. Every fiber of me wanted to run, hide, pretend this wasn't happening, but my body refused. The words had to come. They always had to come. I opened the file, fingers trembling. My voice shook as I began reading. The boss cornered his assistant, pulling him against the wall. Every movement deliberate, every breath shared. The tension was suffocating. Every glance a warning, every touch a promise of what could and would come. Adrian's eyes darkened. His lips parted slightly, just enough to show the curve of that smirk I could never forget. I could feel his presence closer than before, every second pushing me to the edge of trembling. "Stop," he murmured, and my throat went dry. "Read again, but slower. Feel it. Don't just narrate. Experience it." My heart pounded. Experience it? That wasn't narration. That was life. My gaze flicked to his. The shadows of his jaw were sharper tonight. The room smaller, hotter, more dangerous. I swallowed and tried again, slower, every word trembling from my lips. The boss stepped closer, heat radiating off him. The assistant's breath caught, his pulse racing. One hand brushed against the desk, the other hovering, unsure where safety ended and surrender began. The boss's voice, low, commanding, filled the space, wrapping around the assistant like a shackle made of silk and iron. Adrian's exhale brushed my cheek. I froze. I could feel him there, closer than he should have been. My pulse hammered painfully against my ribs. The air between us seemed to vibrate with anticipation, danger, and something far more intoxicating. "Stop narrating," he said softly, so low that my chest tightened. "Act it, live it, show me why it's worth rewriting." I blinked, frozen, caught between terror and a reckless thrill. The room tilted. My words felt suddenly inadequate against the force of his presence. I wanted to scream. I wanted to run, but every instinct screamed that I couldn't. Adrian stepped closer, closing the distance between us in a heartbeat. His hand brushed mine, fingers grazing the laptop, a subtle warning or a promise. "You wrote me desperate before," he murmured. "Not true. I'm precise, controlled, ruthless. Let's see if you can capture that." I shivered. I can try," I whispered. "Try," he repeated, voice dangerous, almost playful. I took a shaky breath and began again, this time moving with him, narrating as I felt the tension coil around us. The boss pressed closer, the assistant trapped between his body and the wall. Every inch measured, every heartbeat synchronized, a breath shared, heavy and electric. The boss's gaze, pierced like knives, dipped in warmth and threat. His hand touched my arm, light, gentle, and yet electric. I jumped slightly, and the smirk on his face widened. "You feel it," he said, husky. "Good. That's the rewrite." I swallowed hard. My fingers hovered over the keys again, desperate to put the chaos into words. The assistant's pulse raced, muscles taut with anticipation and fear. One hand found the boss's wrist, hesitating, testing, understanding that this connection was a storm neither could escape. Adrian's breath brushed my neck. My body betrayed me, responding in ways that made my heart pound even harder. I cursed under my breath. This was supposed to be storytelling, not this. "Keep going," he whispered. The low tone of his voice sent shivers down my spine. "Show me the ending." My hands typed furiously, guided by adrenaline and something dangerously thrilling. The boss leaned closer, measuring the assistant's resolve, testing boundaries. The assistant's gaze flicked to the lips so close, felt the heat of every word unspoken. Silence stretched, thick and suffocating, until the world itself seemed to vanish around them. He moved even closer, pressing slightly, testing the space between us, his smirk teasing the edges of something unreadable. I could feel his pulse, his warmth, the subtle brush of a dangerous power that threatened to sweep me away. "You understand control," he murmured against my ear, so close my breath caught. "You wrote it. Now live it. Show me why it's yours." I couldn't. I wanted to, but my body was trembling too violently, mind spiraling between fear and desire. But words were my weapon. I typed furiously, detailing every inch of tension, every stolen glance, every small, impossible brush of fingers that made my pulse threaten to explode. The assistant realized the boss was untouchable, inevitable. Yet the thrill of proximity, the charge of danger, the forbidden pull of what could be, it was intoxicating, neither yielding, neither surrendering fully, yet both irrevocably changed. Adrian's lips grazed my shoulder, not cruel, not soft, perfectly precise. My knees nearly gave out. My hands gripped the laptop so tightly my knuckles were white. "Enough," he breathed, voice low, almost reverent. "For now. You're learning." I sank back, shaking, my chest heaving. "Learning? This isn't safe." "Safety is boring," he murmured, lips dangerously close to mine again. "But you make it. Unpredictable. Dangerous. Alive." My heart threatened to explode, my body buzzing, my mind spinning. I can't. You can," he interrupted softly, predatory yet teasing. "And you will. Tomorrow we continue." Chapter 14. But for tonight, he stepped back, finally allowing me some air. "We rest. I'll think about how you survived the rewrite." I blinked at him, chest heaving, every nerve on fire. "Rest after that?" You survived," he said, voice calm, smirk lurking. "That's enough for tonight," Felix's voice called from the hall, breaking the tension. "Boss, I made snacks. Want me to bring popcorn?" I groaned, burying my face in my hands. Adrian's smirk only deepened. "Tomorrow," he whispered, voice low and final. "We finished the rewrite, privately. And I knew that whatever came next, it wouldn't just be words anymore. It would be a game. Dangerous, terrifying, and undeniably, utterly, deliciously, ours. The next morning arrived like a slow-burning fuse, the sun creeping through the mansion's massive windows, but failing to brighten the oppressive weight in my chest. I had barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Adrian's smirk, heard the husky rasp of his voice, felt the phantom heat of his proximity as though it were etched into my skin. Felix had disappeared early, claiming security recon, leaving me alone to brace for the next chapter of this unholy rewrite, and I knew Adrian wouldn't be far behind. A knock came at the door, slow, deliberate. My stomach dropped like a stone. "Enter," I called shakily, clutching my laptop like a lifeline. The door swung open, and there he was. Adrian Moretti, impossibly sharp, impossibly dangerous, and impossibly close. His suit was dark, tailored to perfection. But there was a looseness at his tie, and sleeves rolled just enough to reveal sinewy arms that made my chest ache for reasons I wasn't allowed to admit. "Chapter 14, he said softly, almost casual. But the intensity behind it could have sliced steel. "The confrontation." I froze, my mind spun. "The confrontation?" My pulse kicked into overdrive. Adrian wasn't just referring to the rewrite. I knew the docs. I knew the bakery incident. This was more than a story. This was real. Confrontation? With who? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. He stepped closer, the faint click of his shoes against the marble floor echoing like a drumbeat in my chest. "The rival gang, Scar. Their interference has been irritating. You wrote them as background tension, but in reality, they require performance, engagement, observation." I swallowed hard, heart hammering in my throat. You mean real danger?" "Yes," he said simply, smirk tugging at the corner of his mouth. "And you're coming with me. You'll narrate, analyze, and rewrite if necessary." I gaped. "Rewrite? In the middle of a gang standoff?" "Exactly," he said, voice soft but lethal. "And your chapter will be informed by reality." The words made my blood run cold and hot all at once. By the time we reached the sleek black car, my mind was a chaotic mess of terror, adrenaline, and something else that made my pulse thrum dangerously. Felix was waiting, lounging like he wasn't about to witness another unhinged Mafia stunt. "Morning," he said. "Popcorn?" I groaned. "Felix, this isn't..." I can't. Adrian's hand on my back silenced me instantly. Heat radiated from him, a warning and a promise. "You can," he said, voice low and predatory. "And you will. Now move." The drive was tense, punctuated only by the occasional distant roar of the city, the hum of the engine, and Adrian's gaze burning into my back like a second skin. My fingers ached to type, to translate everything into words, but the fear made me nearly frozen. Every scenario I had written in my fic paled in comparison to the palpable tension building outside. When we arrived at the abandoned warehouse district, the sight before me made my stomach knot into a tight, inescapable coil. Scar and his crew were waiting, shadows carved sharp against the dim lights, leather jackets glinting like weapons. Their eyes flicked to Adrian, and then to me, with curiosity, derision, and perhaps disbelief. "You brought the scribe?" One of them jeered, voice dripping with mockery. Adrian's lips curved into a faint, dangerous smile. "She's not just a scribe. She shapes reality." My knees went weak. "Shapes reality?" My fingers itched to type, my mind screaming to capture everything. The tension, the power play, the subtle tremble of my own fear and desire. "Chapter 14, Adrian murmured, stepping forward, his coat flaring like the wings of some predatory angel. "Livery right. Let's see how accurate your words really are." I drew a shaky breath and began narrating, voice barely above a whisper, but carrying with it every ounce of terror and excitement. The boss stepped into the warehouse, the weight of his presence splitting the room. The rival gang faltered, every movement deliberate, calculated, every glance a warning, every word a threat wrapped in silk and fire. The assistant observed, recording, calculating, ensuring the narrative aligned with reality. Adrian's hand brushed mine, brief, electric, but enough to make my pulse spike. I felt his gaze on me, the silent demand that I live the words I typed. Scar stepped forward, voice dripping venom. "You think a story can intimidate us?" I swallowed, trying to focus on narration instead of panic. The boss didn't speak, I read, trembling, because words weren't necessary. Presence alone dictated the rules of engagement. The assistant's breath caught, eyes wide, knowing that in this room, every heartbeat, every whisper, and every movement was a sentence, written by fate, by the boss, by her. Adrian moved with flawless precision, circling Scar, shadow to shadow, heat radiating from him like a storm about to break. His eyes never left mine. Every twitch of muscle, every step, every subtle tilt of his head screamed power, control, and something dangerously personal. I typed furiously, narrating in real time, words flowing like molten lava. The boss's fingers brushed against the assistant's wrist. A subtle touch, yet heavy with unspoken command. The assistant shivered, pulse hammering, as if the air itself had become fire. Scar's laughter cut through the tension, but it was brittle, cracking. The rival gang's confidence faltered, distracted by the dynamic playing out before them. "You're insane," I muttered, voice shaking. Adrian's presence pressed down like gravity itself. "Insanity is optional," he murmured back, dangerously close. "Control is not." Then, in a swift motion, he pressed his palm lightly against my lower back, guiding me closer as Felix whispered, "This is really something." My fingers flew, capturing every breath, every flicker of expression, every tension-laden step. The boss leaned slightly, proximity a weapon, presence a cage. The assistant's heart raced, body caught in the impossible balance between fear and desire. Each word unspoken was a line in the story she typed, each glance a chapter in the live rewrite of their dangerous connection. Adrian's lips brushed my ear, soft but sharp. "Feel it. Every pulse, every heartbeat, every tremble." "Translate it." I did. I let the adrenaline and fear and heat guide me. Every word was electric. Every sentence a spark setting fire to the room, the tension and something deep inside me I couldn't name. Scar finally growled, exasperated and thrown off. What is this?" "The rewrite," Adrian murmured, his smirk razor sharp, his hand still subtly brushing mine. "Every line you wrote, every chapter, every heartbeat, made real. By her." My pulse thundered in my ears. The danger, the adrenaline, the closeness, the thrill, the fear, the warmth of his hand against mine. All of it collided inside me. A chaos that no words could fully capture. I typed, I narrated, I lived the story. And for the first time, I realized the power I held. Not just in the words, but in the effect they had. On him, on the gang, on reality itself. Adrian's lips grazed my temple. "Tomorrow," he whispered, low and lethal. "We finished the chapter. In private, indoors, my knees went weak. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. I could barely stand. But deep down, a wicked, dangerous spark flickered. I had survived this rewrite. And somehow I craved the next one. The mansion felt impossibly silent as we returned, the kind of silence that presses down on your chest and refuses to let go. Adrian led me up the grand staircase without a word, his hand lightly brushing mine. Not casual, not accidental, but claiming, deliberate. I couldn't breathe. My pulse had become a jackhammer inside my ribcage. Every step toward his private study, toward what he called the final rewrite, felt like descending into the eye of a storm I both feared and craved. "Close the door," he ordered once we reached the room. Voice calm, but with the weight of command that made the walls themselves seem to bend. I obeyed, hands trembling. Once it clicked shut behind us, Adrian finally allowed himself a small, controlled exhale. He didn't immediately approach. Instead, he leaned against the desk, arms crossed, dark eyes assessing me like a predator studying prey. "You know why this is the final rewrite," he said, voice low and deliberate. "Not just because your chapters needed correction, but because the story ends here. Everything we've been building, the tension, the danger, the control, it culminates tonight." My stomach dropped. "You mean the bedroom scene?" His smirk flickered, faint but predatory. "Yes, and you're going to write it with me. Live." Every word fact-checked. I swallowed hard. "Adrian, this isn't just writing anymore. This is insane." He stepped closer, and the heat radiating off him stole the air from the room. "Insane is optional," he murmured, echoing something he had said earlier. "Control is mandatory." I felt trapped between terror and an unspoken, dangerous desire. My fingers twitched, aching to type, to narrate, to channel every chaotic emotion into the story. Yet my body betrayed me, trembling where I stood. "Sit," he commanded, gesturing to the leather chair behind the desk. My knees nearly buckled. I obeyed, heart hammering like it might explode. Adrian moved behind me, close enough that the heat of his body pressed against the back of my neck. His hand lightly rested on the top of the chair, a silent claim. "Chapter 15, he murmured, voice husky. "The bedroom. Make it precise. No nonsense, no sloppy lines, no weak moments." My breath hitched. I don't know if I can." "You can," he interrupted softly, deliberately, so close my ear nearly brushed his lips. "Because I'm here. Every line, every heartbeat, every pulse." And then the impossible happened. Adrian leaned closer. Not forcefully, not violently, but enough that the warmth of his body pressed into mine, his presence suffocating and thrilling all at once. My chest rose and fell unevenly, breaths shallow, fingers hovering over the laptop keyboard like they might burn if I touched them. I began typing, voice barely above a whisper. The boss entered the room, every step measured, deliberate. The assistant's pulse quickened at the sound of his presence, every nerve alive with anticipation, fear, and something else. Adrian shifted, brushing his hand along the back of my chair. Subtle but deliberate. I shivered, but I couldn't stop. My fingers moved faster, compelled by the danger and the thrill he radiated. The boss stopped behind the assistant, presence pressing close, heat radiating like fire. He did not speak because words were unnecessary. The weight of him was command enough. The assistant's breath hitched, caught between dread and a dangerous longing that made his chest ache. I risked a glance behind me. Adrian's gaze was fixed on me. Dark, predatory, yet with something like reverent curiosity in the depths. My stomach clenched. Every word I typed seemed to pull him closer, and every movement of his body mirrored my narration in terrifying precision. "Good," he murmured, and the vibration of his voice against my neck made my skin crawl. "More control, absolute, don't hold back." I swallowed, letting the words flow. The boss's hands found the assistant's shoulders, pressing lightly, not to hurt, but to claim, to mark, to dominate. The assistant's knees nearly gave out at the intensity, and yet there was no fear of pain, only the raw, electrifying tension of being completely seen, completely observed. Adrian's breath ghosted my shoulder. "See, you can capture it, but don't forget me, not as story, but as reality." I trembled. Every nerve screamed, but I obeyed. I narrated every second, every subtle movement, every slight shift in tension between us. The lines blurred between fiction and reality. My words became commands, observations, confessions of a body I could no longer fully control. The boss leaned closer, heat brushing the assistant's neck, lips grazing just enough to elicit a shiver, a gasp. The assistant's pulse raced, body caught between instinctive resistance and the undeniable pull of surrender. Because surrender was dangerous, intoxicating, and precise. Adrian's hand brushed mine lightly again, lingering. My breath hitched. The room became a pressure cooker of raw emotion, desire, and dread. I couldn't look up, couldn't meet his eyes without melting. But I continued to type, each word sharper, hotter, more alive than the last. "Read it," he whispered, and I nearly dropped the laptop. I hesitated. He leaned even closer, murmuring, "Trust me, live it, don't edit, don't second guess." So I read. My voice trembled, barely holding the cadence of controlled narration. The assistant's hands trembled slightly, brushing against the desk for support, feeling the heat radiate from the boss behind him. Every movement was deliberate, measured, designed to provoke thought, fear, and, against reason, desire. The boss's lips brushed the assistant's ear, whispering words that were both a command and a promise, a declaration of ownership and of something unspoken, something dangerously real. Adrian mirrored it. His lips brushed my ear, soft, precise, controlled. A shiver ran through me, and I typed with reckless abandon, narrating every reaction, every twitch, every pulse of heat. The boss's presence was a storm, and the assistant stood in it, heart racing, breath uneven, caught between fear, admiration, and the intoxicating draw of someone who knew exactly what they were doing, who controlled every moment. The tension was unbearable. Every word I typed was electric. Every brush of his hand, every whisper, every proximity filled the room with a kind of dangerous intimacy that no fiction could ever replicate. My heart was a live wire. Finally, Adrian spoke, his lips brushing my temple. "Stop," I froze. My fingers hovered over the keys. "Enough," he said softly. But there was steel under the velvet. "This chapter ends here. Your final rewrite, it's complete." My entire body sagged with relief and longing. I realized with a shocking clarity that this rewrite wasn't just about words. It was about trust, control, surrender, and power. About two people navigating a dangerous, intoxicating connection in the middle of chaos. Adrian's hand lingered on my shoulder. "You survived it," he said. "And so did I, somehow. Even with the danger, even with the risk, we did." I exhaled shakily. I don't know how I survived." "You did," he murmured, dark eyes scanning mine. "And the story ends here, but you and I? That's far from over." Somewhere in the haze of adrenaline, fear, and desire, I realized I had been rewritten too. Not just the fic, not just the chapters, but me. Changed, sharpened, terrified, and inexplicably drawn to the chaos that was Adrian Moretti. And I knew. The next chapter of our story, our reality, would be far more dangerous, far more intimate, and far more unpredictable than any fanfic I could have ever imagined. The mansion felt impossibly still after the final rewrite. Too still. My fingers still tingled from the adrenaline, and my chest felt as if it had been sculpted by a hammer, each heartbeat sharp, unrelenting. Adrian didn't leave my side, and I didn't want him to. Not really, but fear and fascination twisted in my stomach like a living thing. "You survived the rewrite," he murmured again, voice low, almost reverent. "Few do. Fewer still walk away unchanged." I swallowed, feeling the truth in that statement. I was changed, shaken, alert, every nerve on fire. But it wasn't just the adrenaline or fear. It was him. Always him. Always the weight of him pressing into my thoughts, my chest, my very pulse. I don't even know how to process that, I whispered. My voice sounded foreign to me, raw with emotion I hadn't realized I was holding back. Adrian's eyes darkened. Process it later. For now, you need to see why this matters. He turned abruptly and strode toward the window, pulling the curtains just enough to reveal the city sprawling beneath us. Lights like scattered fireflies, shadows crawling between streets and alleyways. The rewrite wasn't just fanfiction. It's strategy. My stomach dropped. Strategy? I glanced at him, confusion and unease warring with the pulse of adrenaline still racing through me. You write narratives, Adrian continued, voice even but layered with authority. I control the real ones, but now I can see the value of perspective. You make people see, feel, anticipate. That's power. And power is dangerous in the wrong hands. I shivered. You mean, my story is part of your operations? He nodded slowly, gaze sharp as knives. Exactly. Your interpretations. It predicts reactions. Rivals, associates, even my crew. I need precision, peachy kiss. Understanding of motives, of tension, of loyalty. And you captured it better than most of my generals could. I wanted to laugh, or scream, or maybe just curl into a corner and cry. So, I'm a consultant? I asked, voice trembling. Adrian's smirk flickered, that sharp, dangerous curve that had become my constant torment. More than that, you're a live strategist, observer, interpreter. And yes, the final rewrite. That was the first real test. My chest tightened. Not just from fear, not just from adrenaline, but because suddenly, everything made sense. The way he had pulled me into every scene, every enactment, not just for amusement, not just for punishment, but for precision, for preparation. And if I mess up? I whispered, dread creeping into my voice. Adrian stepped closer, close enough that I could feel the heat radiating off him, suffocating, intoxicating. Then you fail the mission. But I don't fail. His hand brushed my jaw lightly, not harsh, not violent, but claiming, definitive. So we adapt, together. My breath hitched. Together? Together, he echoed, low, predatory, and almost intimate. Every scene, every encounter, every risk. You write it, I enact it, we perfect it. My pulse thundered in my ears. The line between fiction and reality blurred until it no longer existed. The adrenaline of the rewrite, the terror, the intimacy, it all surged into a dizzying storm. And then the phone rang. Adrian didn't hesitate. He answered immediately, voice deep and authoritative. I stayed frozen, heart thundering. Whatever followed was dangerous, real, and utterly merciless. Understood, he said finally, slamming the phone shut. His gaze landed on me, sharp and lethal. West Docks. Rival gangs making a move. This will be our next test. I felt my knees weaken. Next test? You mean fight? Real fight? Yes, he said simply, voice low and final, but not without preparation. And you'll document it. Every strategy, every movement, every reaction. Your narrative will guide us. I swallowed hard, caught between horror and the undeniable, dangerous thrill that radiated off him. So, I'm part of this? You are, he said, stepping closer, brushing my hair behind my ear. And yes, that means you're close enough to see, feel, anticipate, and survive. My chest tightened in ways that had nothing to do with fear. It had everything to do with him. His hand lingered near mine, brushing against my wrist lightly, and I realized with a jolt that I had begun to crave his proximity, his heat, the suffocating awareness of him. Don't make me faint, I muttered, voice trembling. Adrian's smirk was merciless. Then don't let me get too close. I let out a short, humorless laugh. Too late. He didn't respond, just stepped closer, letting the air between us become a charged, living entity. Every breath, every heartbeat, every subtle movement was amplified. My hands hovered over my laptop, ready to narrate, to capture, to translate reality into words. But my mind was a chaotic storm of fear, desire, and adrenaline. And then, in the midst of all this tension, Felix appeared. His grin was infuriating, and his timing impeccable. Ready to go, boss? He asked casually, as if we weren't moments away from crossing from narrative into something entirely dangerous. Adrian didn't take his eyes off me. She is, he said softly. And then, almost to himself, she has to be. I felt my chest constrict. My pulse had become a drumbeat of terror and thrill. I can do this, I whispered to myself, though part of me wasn't sure I believed it. Adrian's hand brushed mine lightly, again, intentionally, reminding me of the delicate balance of fear and desire we shared. You will, he said, voice almost gentle now. Because you already have. And because we don't back down. I wanted to scream, to cry, to throw myself into the abyss. But the thrill, the danger, the undeniable intensity between us held me captive, alive and dangerously aware of every moment, every detail, every subtle claim of his presence. The car awaited, black, sleek, waiting like a predator ready to pounce. Adrian gestured for me to enter first, then Felix, then himself. The ride was silent at first, but the tension inside the car was like electricity, impossible to dissipate. "Remember," Adrian said finally, voice low and deliberate. "Every moment counts. Every reaction matters. And, peachy kiss?" I looked up at him, pulse thundering. He leaned closer, almost impossibly close, his hand brushing the small of my back, and whispered, "Do not let anyone forget your presence. Not in my world. Not in this story. Not ever." And just like that, the stakes had been raised. Mafia, danger, desire, narrative. They weren't separate anymore. They were entwined. And I realized, with shocking clarity, that I was no longer just an observer, or a writer, or a frightened fangirl. I was a player, and this game was far from over. I swallowed, steadying my trembling hands. I'm ready." Adrian's smirk returned, small, cruel, knowing. "Good, because tonight, the docs won't just test your writing. They'll test you, and me, and what we can survive, together." My stomach flipped. My pulse screamed. My entire body was alive in ways I hadn't thought possible. This was no longer fan fiction. This was real, dangerous, unpredictable, and I was right in the middle of it. The docks reeked of salt, diesel, and gunpowder, a scent that had become almost intoxicating in its danger. Rusted shipping containers loomed like jagged teeth under the moonlight, and shadows moved like predators. My hands gripped the edge of my laptop case as if it were a lifeline. My pulse throbbed in my temples. "Are we seriously doing this at night?" I muttered, trying to sound braver than I felt. Felix smirked, chewing on a protein bar as if this were a casual stroll. Adrian didn't answer. He never did when he was calculating. He just stepped ahead, black coat flaring, a figure of deadly elegance, and his eyes, dark, sharp, unyielding, scanned the perimeter like a hawk. I realized again that this wasn't just a fanfic rewrite. This was life imitating art, imitating danger. My stupid fanfic had prepared me for nothing. Yet here I was, in the middle of a real-life enactment, heart hammering with terror and thrill. A whistle cut through the night air. Shadows detached from the darkness. 10, maybe 15 men. Leather jackets, tattoos catching moonlight. Scar and his crew. Rival gang. Territorial threats. "Boss," Felix muttered, voice low. "This seems excessive." Adrian's smirk was a blade. "Excessive is subjective," he replied smoothly. His hand brushed mine, a subtle but incendiary claim of presence. "Are you ready for the rewrite?" I froze. "Rewrite?" He leaned close, jaw almost grazing my ear. "Every story has a climax, Peachy, and this is ours. Observe, narrate, survive, direct, adapt." My pulse threatened to rip through my chest. My laptop felt heavier than a brick, full of unspoken words, my own narrative now a map for survival. I realized the gravity. If I made a mistake, it wouldn't just be bad storytelling. It could be bullets, betrayal, maybe worse. Scar stepped forward, cracking his knuckles. "Boss, we can do this the easy way or the hard way. Your choice." Adrian's gaze flicked to me. "Narrate." I opened my laptop, hands trembling. Okay, chapter 18. The docks. The confrontation. My voice shook, but I began. The Mafia boss stood like a shadow over his territory. Rivals encroached, unaware that every heartbeat, every glance, every movement had been anticipated. Adrian's hand brushed my back lightly, sending a shiver down my spine. I realized I was narrating and directing him simultaneously. Each word a command, each description a script he interpreted with terrifying precision. The rival gang surged forward, but Adrian's presence stopped them mid-step. His eyes were cold, calculated, predatory. And then, he looked at me. "Your rewrite," he said. "Now." My hands flew across the keyboard, fingers trembling. The boss moved like a shadow, silent but unyielding. He pressed forward, body close to his assistant, not with desperation, but control. Absolute control. Every breath, every step, calculated. Adrian's movements mirrored my words perfectly. He stepped closer to Felix, closing the distance I had written about. Felix's eyes widened, lips parting in a mix of irritation and something else I wasn't ready to label. The rival gang laughed nervously, sensing an opening. Scar's smirk faltered. "Boss, don't be stupid." But Adrian didn't move, not a muscle out of place. Felix's back pressed against the container as Adrian's presence enveloped him, commanding, suffocating, magnetic. The tension was tangible, I could almost feel the static in the air. Now, Adrian whispered, brushing a hand along Felix's jaw just enough to make my chest ache. Deliver the line, I swallowed. You're mine. Let them watch. My voice trembled but carried. The effect was instantaneous. Felix's eyes flicked to Adrian, a sharp inhale betraying his calm facade. The rival gang froze. Their confidence wavered, unprepared for the combination of threat and something more. Adrian's lips brushed Felix's ear lightly, exactly as she wrote. I realized, with a shocking mix of fear and exhilaration, that my words had manifested as a weapon. Not just a narrative, but a tool of influence, of domination, of strategy. I was trembling. Not from fear, but from the sheer intensity of being part of this story, of this power. Scar's voice cracked. What the hell is this? Some kind of fanfic performance? Adrian's hand tightened slightly on Felix's shoulder, just enough to communicate ownership, control, dominance. Reality, he corrected. You think you understand power, but you're just reading the page. Now step back. The rival gang exchanged glances, clearly unnerved. My narration picked up pace, fingers flying. The assistant trembled, but not from fear. From the undeniable force of the boss's presence. Every heartbeat, every inhalation, every step. Orchestrated. The city waited. But in this moment, only they existed. Power, desire, strategy, entwined. Adrian's eyes flicked to me, the slightest curve of his lips, a silent acknowledgement. His hand brushed against mine again, a spark of heat that sent shivers down my spine. Every motion, every breath was coordinated by my words. My fanfic had become a battle plan. Scar finally spoke. I can't... What is this? Adrian's smirk sharpened, cold, predatory. Control, he said simply. Then, lowering his voice so only Scar could hear, he added, and consequences. The rival gang hesitated, unsure. The tension was unbearable, and then Felix stepped forward, almost imperceptibly. But his gaze met Adrian's, and a silent understanding passed between them. Trust, loyalty, connection forged in the furnace of danger and narrative. I watched, heart hammering, as the confrontation began to dissolve. Scar and his men retreated, clearly unnerved and outmaneuvered by a combination of precision, strategy, and psychological dominance. Adrian turned, his gaze falling on me, smoldering, dangerous, and intimate. See, he murmured. Your rewrite. It's not just words, it's power. I felt my knees weaken, chest tight, lips dry. I didn't think... You did, he said, stepping closer. His hand brushed my hair back, gentle and yet claiming. And you will. Every time, every story, every scene, every moment that matters. The docks fell silent, except for the lapping of water against rusted hulls. The danger had passed, but the intensity lingered. My chest ached, my hands shook, my pulse screamed, and I realized terrifyingly that I was addicted to the danger, to the adrenaline, to the closeness, to Adrian. You survived the final rewrite, he said, voice low, silk and steel. And his hand grazed my jaw, tilting my face toward his. I've never been more aware of what's real. Or what matters. My breath caught. Adrian. His lips brushed mine lightly. A promise, a warning, a declaration. You're mine. Every rewrite, every story, every heartbeat, and I am yours. I wanted to scream, to melt, to throw myself into him. The docks, the danger, the night, they all disappeared. There was only him, only us. Only the shattering, intoxicating reality of what we had become. The city lights blinked faintly in the distance. The water shimmered. The night held its breath. And in that suspended moment, I knew the rewrite was never over. It had just begun, and I wouldn't want it any other way. The city was quiet that morning, a deceptive calm stretching across neon-lit streets and shadowed alleys. I sat on the edge of Adrian's massive bed, laptop abandoned beside me, and watched him move through his office with the fluid grace of a predator who had just won a battle without breaking a sweat. The adrenaline from last night's confrontation still hummed in my veins, leaving me both exhilarated and exhausted. You're awake, Adrian said, voice low and smooth, carrying the faintest trace of amusement. He leaned against the doorway, arms crossed, the moonlight catching the sharp planes of his face. Good, I'm surviving, I muttered, my voice hoarse. My stomach still twisted thinking about how we'd turned my fanfic into a live-action standoff, and somehow won. He smirked, stepping closer. Surviving is a start, thriving is better. His eyes caught mine, piercing, magnetic, and I felt my chest tighten. Adrian had a way of making even the calmest words feel like a verdict, and a promise. Felix wandered in, hair mussed and shirt slightly wrinkled, holding 2 cups of coffee. You two look like you survived a war. Or a fanfic apocalypse. Either way, impressive. I groaned. I'm never looking at a shipping container the same way again. Felix smirked. You might get some inspiration out of it. For the next chapter. I shot him a glare that could have melted steel. But Adrian's chuckle stopped me. He leaned down, brushing a hand along my arm, and whispered, Careful. The next rewrite might be personal. My pulse stuttered. Personal? I swallowed hard, feeling a thrill that mixed fear and something far more dangerous. Anticipation. Personal how? I asked, voice trembling slightly despite my attempt at control. You'll see, he said, eyes glinting. I want you to understand every word you write, every line, every glance, every heartbeat. It all matters. I shivered, not from the cold, but from the way his hand lingered, claiming, commanding, and somehow comforting all at once. The man who had threatened me, dominated me, and made me rewrite scenes I never imagined, now stood quietly beside me, holding an invisible power over my heart. Felix coughed behind us. Okay, so we leave the fanfic heroics aside, or are we doing territory negotiations next? Adrian straightened, giving Felix a look sharp enough to slice. Then his attention returned to me. You survived. You directed the chaos, survived the rewrite, and you impressed me. Impressed you? I echoed, half laughing, half panicking. I didn't even faint. That's apparently a miracle in your world. His smirk softened, just slightly, but enough to make my chest ache. Not fainting is admirable, he said, voice low. Then, before I could respond, he added, but it's more than that. You understand now, don't you? Power, control, story, it's all connected, and you know how to wield it. I blinked. I think I do. The words felt small against the enormity of what we just survived, but they were true. Somehow my words, had become more than fiction. They had become strategy, influence, and something far more intimate. Adrian's hand brushed my cheek, gentle but possessive. And this us, it's real! My heart leapt, thundering against my ribs. Real? I whispered. He nodded, voice husky. Dangerous, chaotic, unexpected, and real. I swallowed. Words caught in my throat. The man who had kidnapped me, dominated my narrative, and forced me into rewriting scenes I never thought I'd live through, had claimed something in me that I couldn't name but couldn't deny. Felix cleared his throat again. So, breakfast? Or do we skip right to villain negotiations and hostage dramatics? I groaned, but Adrian chuckled, soft and dark. Breakfast first, he said, voice calm but with an edge that warned of future rewrites, both literal and metaphorical. Then we plan, then we enjoy the consequences of surviving the final rewrite. I laughed, the sound trembling but relieved. Surviving the final rewrite, that's actually a badge of honor now, isn't it? Adrian stepped closer, closing the small distance between us. More than a badge, he murmured, brushing his lips briefly against mine. It's proof that you can handle me, handle this world, and maybe handle us. My knees weakened slightly, but this time I didn't falter. I tilted my head up, meeting his gaze, letting the words I hadn't yet spoken settle between us. Maybe I can. His smirk returned, faint but undeniable. Good, because we're far from done. The rewrite, it never really ends. Every story has layers, Peachy. Every scene, every heartbeat is part of the power. And you're part of it too. I felt a thrill that mixed terror, exhilaration, and longing. I had written about this world, created this chaos on the page, and now I lived in it, shaping it with my words and my heart. Felix shook his head, muttering to himself as he left the room. I'm never touching fanfiction again. Or maybe I'll start shipping my own stories, but from a safe distance. Definitely safe distance. Adrian's fingers brushed mine again, lingering. Come, he said softly. Let's face the morning, the city, the world, together. And then, Peachy, we plan the next rewrite. But this time, it's ours. I exhaled, heart racing, palms sweaty. But this time there was no fear, just exhilaration, anticipation, and something unshakable. We had survived the docks, the danger, the fanfic turned reality. And now we stood together in a world that was as chaotic and unpredictable as my writing. Yet somehow, perfect. I smiled, the corners of my lips trembling. Okay, I said, voice steady. But next time, I get to write the opening scene. He laughed softly, low and dangerous. Next time, he murmured. And for the first time, the smirk wasn't teasing, wasn't predatory. It was warm. The sun began to rise over the city skyline, washing the streets in gold and amber. And as we stood there, side by side, I realized something profound. My words had changed everything. They had written me into a world of danger, passion, and power. and somehow they had written Adrian into my life in a way that no fanfic, no page, could ever have predicted. The final rewrite wasn't over. It would never truly be over. But for the first time, I didn't fear it, because I was ready. And somehow terrifyingly, I was excited.